Hi, I'm Christopher Bolton, a production designer from South Africa. Welcome to this series of MSD5 tutorials. Let's get started. Welcome to this edition of the MSD5 tutorials. In this edition, I'm going to cover settings and preferences, objects and fixtures. In the first edition of the tutorials, I dealt with the basic layouts and how to incorporate your windows, how to store it so that the next time you open the windows, it will be exactly as you left it. A bit more around the settings. In settings itself, you go to preferences. That brings up this window here. In this window, there are a couple of things that you can adjust. On the first, render settings, you can adjust ambient light, your shadow, you can select your smoke, the intensity of the smoke, type of smoke, and the white level within it. This of course will only have effect when you get to render out the pictures. The next section is under Snap. Under Snap, the program itself has what is called magnetic objects or rotational snap. This means that you can set settings that when you are working with objects, when they come within a certain range of each other, they will snap together. The rotational snap has been set to snap within every 5 degrees when you are rotating the object. Under units, in different countries they use different units. Here you can select which of the parameters you would like to use. In South Africa we use meters and millimeters. Degrees for angles, you can also work with gradients. The light intensity, weight, and the DMX universe offset. Under gamma, you can change the overall gamma of the program, where you can enhance the red, green, or blue, or even change your black and white level. Under paths, this is very important to know. This is where every piece of the MSD package comes together. This is where everything gets stored, everything gets pulled from. You can easily make changes if you want to by simply browsing and finding the relative folder that you are looking for. The DirectX driver is exactly what it says. It shows you that you can change it. Normally the auto detect is what you want to use. Language options. This is pretty self-explanatory. Under options, here in this window, you're able to change the layout preferences exactly the way you prefer it. In my example, I've chosen 1 meter or 1000 millimeter blocks, which I find easier to work with. You can also change the grid colors, your autosave status, and your toolbars. Let's take a look at objects. Firstly, importing objects. If you come to View, Objects List, click on the Import button, it'll take you to your model folder, which is where all the objects you have in your inventory are kept. There you can add over time the trussing that you are using, the screens, the stage, the equipment, band equipment, whatever it is your heart desires to use. You choose something and simply import it. That will then be placed in the objects list. If you click on the Insert, then click on the screen, it will bring up your list of objects. Another really good way of importing objects, especially if you want to create an object, is to use the fast switch function and switch from your show designer into your modeler. Once you are in the modeler, it'll prompt you with an object box or list that looks like this. If you want to create a new object, then you click on New. In the modeler window, you should have the same list in here as you do in the show designer, because this list is applicable to the Commonwealth Games welcome tutorial that I am using here as an example. If you want to create a new object, you click on the modeler, which will be covered in more detail later on in the tutorials. You can then place objects in the modeler, save it. In this case, I'm going to call it Red Tower, and then switch back to the show designer. Once you switch back, you will now see, if you go to your objects list and pull it down, the red tower will be here as you made it. The nice thing about this is, as well as having imported this object or having made it from scratch in the modeler, You can now also alter this object very easily in the Show Designer. You can either alter it within the program itself by going to Properties, coming to the Materials, clicking on the material that is referenced here, changing the color. Or alternatively, if you need to make structural changes to it, which you can also do here to a certain extent, by simply changing the size. You can also switch back to the modeler. As you can see, the object is not being changed, even though you have changed it in the Show Designer. If you are making any structural changes to your sets, it is recommended to rather switch to the modeler and change the physical properties of the object within the modeler itself. Let's have a closer look at using the objects and how you can manipulate them. For now, I'm going to increase the window to full screen. For example, if I want to build a 3x4 meter truss screen, click on the Insert button, find the relative trussing that I need. This trussing I have found in my list by importing it from View, Objects List, and importing it. For now, what I'm going to need is a 4 meter piece of truss, a 3 meter piece of truss, a corner block, and the connectors that are going to go on the block. Now that I have this, you can see I am working in the front view plane. I'm able to, by using the Move or your hotkey M for Move, you can grab the object and put it on top of where you want it to be. Now you can see how the snap function works. You can also use the nudge, which are your arrow keys, left to right. This will make it move 1 pixel at a time, or by using Shift and the arrows, shifting it 10 pixels at a time. If you go to the top view, you can see that this is not exactly in the right place. You can then use your Move function, move it to the corner. To rotate it, you can use any of your rotational functions here. As you can see, the arrows indicate move functions. These are your rotational functions. Or you can use the hotkey for rotate, which is R. As you can see, I'm actually rotating this coupler. You can also use Control and the arrow keys. This will make it jump by increments of 45 degrees. This is quite a handy function to use if you want to work quickly. Once you've done this, you can use the duplication function to duplicate the same object by simply clicking on either this one over here and placing it here, or you can use the hotkey, which is the Control and D function for duplicating, and you can place it there. Now that you've done that, you need to put the same amount of connectors on this side of the block. You do not need to do the same process again. You can simply, by using the left mouse button, use the elastic band effect. Grab those 4 objects. Once they are highlighted, you will see that 3 of them will be green and 1 of them will be red. You can then use your group function by grouping those 4 objects together. It will now be an assembly or a group that you can now copy and move across. Now that we have the corner blocks, I now bring in my 3 meter piece of truss that will be my upright. I can now copy this portion of the block that I need. Group that together. Group or ungroup is G and U for ungroup. You then duplicate it. Rotate it. Move it into position. We are now ready for our 4 meter piece of truss. Rotate that. As well as your left mouse button having an elastic band effect, the right mouse button, if you hold it down, enables you to zoom into an area closer. You can also use your mouse scroll button to be able to move backwards and forwards in and out of the model. We need this group that is here to be on this side of the model as well, which can easily enough be done by using the elastic band effect and grabbing the entire group. grouping it together, duplicating it, flipping it, and then moving it into place. Copy that. It is also always advisable to have a look at your set and your model from a right-hand side so that you can see and make sure that everything is lined up both X, Y, and Z axes. Once you have that on your screen, you now need a screen surface. There are numerous ways of going about this. You can easily use a flat object. For example, I use a cyclorama, which I created in the modeler. In here, you have many ways of now adjusting this object. You can either right-click Properties, go into the actual object properties and change it physically. Or a quick way of getting to that, as a shortcut, is Alt-Enter. This is quite handy because it brings up the properties rather quickly. There you can put in the exact properties that you want. Another way of doing this is by using your shaping buttons. Here you can scale the horizontal and the vertical. This is normally advisable when you are working with something that you don't know what the set sizes are. This can be quite useful. You can group the whole object together, move it as one, and then duplicate the whole object. Here's another really useful tip. Let's use a piece of truss for an example. I'm using the Ctrl-D or duplication functions to duplicate these. You can't always get them perfect, and sometimes there's a gap, in this case the piece of truss or object. You can select them all by using the left mouse button and then selecting the one piece of truss as a point of reference. You click on that, go to Operations, Alignment, Align Chain. That will then close all the gaps and make sure that the X, Y, and Z axes are aligned properly. Another very accurate way of duplicating is as follows. Let me take another piece of truss as an example. You can see on this piece of truss that it rotates around a specific point in the truss that has been set. You can set that in the modeler. For now, I want to show you how this works. If you take this object and you come to this button here, this is the multiple duplication tool. You click on it. You can be very specific about how you want to do this. You can see it brings up a cursor. This means you can place it in line. That brings up this window. In this window, you can put in relative positions of where you want the copies to go. Because this truss is 1 meter, we know that we want the X displacement to be 1 meter. The Y displacement to be 0 because it's trussing and you want all the trussing to be aligned. You can then add in how many copies you want. In this case 5, go OK, and it places them all in a row for you. Before I move on to fixtures, there's one more thing I'd like to show you. I want to show you how to put objects onto an objects list. It works very similarly to the principle of Photoshop layers. You can place different objects on a layer, so you can hide it when you are not working on that specific object layer. You simply select by using your left mouse button or individually. Right-click on it, go to the object layer, and then place it on that layer. By doing that, you'd be able to come in and hide that layer or recall that layer. Let's get going on the fixtures. In the same manner that you imported the objects, you go to View, Fixture List, click on Add. It'll take you to your Spots folder, which again is in your MSD folder. Once you have that, you will see that there are ones that are in folders and ones that are called SPL files. The ones that are in folders are fixture assemblies, groups, or blocks. It is advisable that you go and look for the actual spot file. In this case, we are looking for a Martin fixture. Go to the spot file. It brings up the list. You find the required light that you are looking for, click on it, and then import it into your system. Now, when you are using this icon over here, fixture insert, it's very similar to the object insert. You click on that, click where you want it, and it'll bring up the list of fixtures that you have or want to use within your model. In the same way by which you could adjust the properties of the objects, you could also, by using the right-click, properties, or Alt-Enter, adjust the properties of the fixtures. You can bring up the properties of the fixture. Here you can see the fixture type. Here's the orientation, which is where it's actually positioned in the model. Your focus points and the rotation. You can change these properties here. Info patch is the DMX address and fixture ID. That can also be changed at a later stage by using auto patch. I will get into that in a later edition of the MSD tutorials. The beam shape. Here you can change the optics of the fixtures. In color mix you can adjust the actual color, the color wheels, your pan and tilt. Other being if you have any specific settings that you want to put in there. It will vary from fixture to fixture. Under notes you can see specific notes that have been made by, in this example, Offerbrum and Paul Pelletier, who are the gentlemen that created this fixture. Once again, you can see here on layers, you can straight away assign your fixture to the layer you want. The same manner by which you can copy and duplicate objects, you can also copy and duplicate fixtures. You simply duplicate them one at a time, or if you have a whole row of them, you can place your marker. You can tell them you want them to be a meter apart. Keeping in mind your reference point is from the center of the fixture here to the center of the fixture there. On the y-axis you want 0. Let's use 4 copies of that in one line. And there you go. It will then place these fixtures for you exactly a meter apart between the central point of the fixture. These can also be grouped together, ungrouped, or grouped and rotated around the axis as you prefer. To create the group, as I mentioned earlier, you can click on Fixtures, these buttons on the top, or you can come here and add in by clicking here and typing your group name in. You can then assign these to that group. I'd now like to show you how to go about making a fixture assembly. To imagine a fixture assembly, picture a bar of 6 par cans. Let's create the bar by inserting a cylinder, going into properties, and changing the dimensions. You then go to the fixture insert and choose the fixture you want, in this case a par 64. Always check from the side to ensure it is aligned. Use your multiple duplication tool, giving it a displacement of 350 in this case, and making 5 copies. The difference between grouping and an assembly is the following. If you group the objects and fixtures together, it makes them one object, and you are unable to individually control the properties of each of these fixtures. When creating an assembly, always ensure your LX bar is highlighted, and then click on the Assemble button. What that means is you can still move it around as one object, but you can also now control the individual properties of each fixture. Now that you have the fixtures in the model, it is important to be able to focus them. There are numerous ways of doing this. Let's maximize one of these windows. The first way of doing it is by right-clicking on the model, going to Spot Beams, and choosing Always. That will show you a representation of where each beam is pointing. In the top left-hand corner, you can select a few functions here: the Move Beam and Focus Beam. If you choose the Focus Beam, you can select the light and you can physically focus the beam where you want it to be. Another very effective way of doing it, and it's the way I personally prefer, is you come here to Fixture View, Select the fixture that you want, click on the fixture view, and then it looks through the fixture as if your eye is inside the fixture. You can then point the fixture where you want it to be. Once you have selected OK, it'll of course stay there. Another handy tool within the Show Designer package is the ability to be able to test different fixtures. What that means is, in this situation, for example, I've inserted a Max 700 profile. Say I want to see what a Max 2000 profile would do in that position. I can select the fixtures, come to Operation, Fixture Operation, and replace with a fixture. What that means is you can replace those fixtures easily enough by simply choosing the fixture that you want to replace it with. By doing that, it has replaced the Max 700 fixtures with a Max 2000 performance, which I have chosen. One of the advantages is that it also keeps the information, keeping in mind that the Max 700 uses less channels than the Max 2000, and you might therefore have to double check your patch. That's all for this edition of the MSD tutorials. I hope that it has been helpful, and I look forward to sharing some more insight with you in the next edition.